Today I'd like to discuss the movie Hillbilly Elegy. This is a movie that's based on the autobiography of the VP-elect now, J.D. Vance. And I have an interesting history with this movie. This came out, I think in 2020, actually. And so I think it might have been because there weren't that many movies showing in movie theaters at the time. Maybe it just got immediately kicked to Netflix or whatever. Or maybe it did have a theatrical run that just didn't last very long. But it was a pretty star-studded cast. Well, not star-studded, but it had some people in it that were recognizable. Most notably, Amy Adams, playing against type, because Amy Adams is a, very girl next door, very appealing, feminine kind of character most of the time. And here she's sort of got a little bit of that, but she's also this just off the rails, drugged up, terrible mother, abusive mother, but who alternates between abusiveness and moments of tenderness and times where we actually sympathize with her, and also other times where she just seems like somebody who's just absolutely beyond help. Now, so Amy Adams is in it. Glenn Close, almost unrecognizable if you watch this movie, which if you have Netflix, you can still watch it. Glenn Close is, it's sort of a coup, this role that she plays. She plays the role of the grandma, J.D. Vance's grandma, and she just very much, it's a great makeup job. I don't know. She just without, being unkind or anything like that. She just has a very white, trashy kind of look, and way of speaking and way of dressing. And she just is totally embodies the role. But not in a, again, I say white trash, but I'm trying to think of a better, there's like not a, is there a more positive way of putting that term? Because the characters in this movie are white trash, rednecks, hillbillies, hence the title Hillbilly Elegy. And that's sort of the point of the movie. Now, the movie was directed by Ron Howard. And I remember there being some controversy about, oh, how could you make this movie glorifying this Republican, but it was, J.D. Vance wasn't really that well known. But what makes his story interesting is that he came out of this environment, this extremely chaotic environment where the opioid epidemic was and still is, wrecking the community, killing people, and factories are closing down and people are out of work, and there's lots of sadness and desperation and so forth. And so it's a segment of the country that is an enormous part of the country and a significant part of the demographic of the country, but it's one that we rarely hear about because Hollywood just tends to hate these people. What we do see more of are, like either the barrio or the hood, where it's not white people. Then it's cool to make movies about them and profile them and discuss the struggles that they have, dealing with day-to-day life and all of that. But when it's this particular community that is struggling in many of the same ways, they're generally ignored or just looked down on or laughed at. So this movie, which is based on a book, is interesting in that regard, in how it bucks this trend. This is essentially Boys in the Hood, if it were made for hillbillies or so-called white trash, as opposed to poor blacks in the living in South Central LA. But there's a lot of the same kinds of struggles, a lot of the same kinds of hardships, and so forth. These are people who have rough lives. Now, what I remember about seeing this movie, it was a very singular event for me, and that's part of what brought it back to mind. In late 2020, late December, after Christmas in 2020, I said I wanted to visit my parents. Now, and I did. I went to visit my parents in Atlanta. My parents were very, without dwelling on this too much, how the way that I saw the whole 2020 thing, the way that I saw the so-called pandemic and everything, my attitude towards everything, they were the exact opposite. Okay, and they lived in great fear of this virus, we really didn't see them, me or much of anybody else in my family. We really didn't see them for most of the year. The only time most of the times that we saw them were through Zoom calls. And so I wanted to come to Atlanta, just come to Atlanta for a visit. And I asked them about it, and they said, okay, but here's the thing: you've got to just walk in through the back door, and we can't ever be in the same room together. And so it was a very peculiar sort of visit. We would communicate to each other, but never be close to one another, hardly ever. I think there was some time where we went for a walk, and they, I could get in the car with them, and as long as I had my mask on, and we drove somewhere, and then I would have to walk around with my mask on, which I agreed to do just because I wanted, even though I hated the whole mask thing, as you should know, as you well know, if you follow my channel. But I just wanted to spend time with my parents. Anyway, let's bring this back to the subject at hand. There were a couple of movies that my mom in particular, who's no longer with us, but my mom in particular was interested in seeing. And one of the ones that caught her eye was this Hillbilly Elegy. Now, my mom was very much of a knee-jerk Democrat voter. So I don't know if she just didn't get the memo that J.D. Vance was a Republican, or if maybe in this case, she didn't care because the story sounded interesting to her. But in any case, I said, yeah, okay, let's watch it. Now, we watched it in separate rooms. My parents watched it on their television in the living room, and I watched it in the guest room on my phone. So we just watched it simultaneously at the same time. It's pretty weird. But I remember we had an interesting conversation about the movie, and it's funny to move into 2024. Unfortunately, My mother died earlier this year. Like, what would she be thinking now? You know, that J.D. Vance, that Trump is president, becoming president again, and J.D. Vance is the VP, and this was the movie that she wanted to watch back in 2020 when few people knew who J.D. Vance was. So that's just an interesting memory that I have. Now, as far as the movie itself, I think it's an interesting watch. I think it's kind of a little bit corny. I think it's a little bit, there are times when it's a little bit emotionally manipulative. It's not, you know, it's a little melodramatic. It's not my favorite kind of movie. It's a little treacly. It's a little overly sentimental, a little too, you know, apt to try to tug at your heartstrings. And I mean, I think this is par for the course for Ron Howard. I think most of his movies are like that. You know, even though he's an acclaimed, respected director, I'm not, to me, he's kind of second rate, frankly. But the fact that he was green-lighted to make this particular movie in liberal Hollywood and got some big names like Amy Adams and Glenn Close to be in it is pretty interesting. Now, what more should I say about it? I didn't remember at the time. I thought, I wasn't sure if it was, you know, autobiographical, totally autobiographical, or if it was a movie that was based on a book that J.D. Vance wrote, which was based on his childhood, but where, you know, he made up a different character with a different name, you know, sort of like James Joyce writing as making himself Stephen Dedalus in The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. But no, he's JD. It's JD throughout the whole thing, which is, it's just kind of wild now in the context of today to see it in that way. But I will give the movie credit because, again, I think it does a pretty good job of showing the kind of things this community has to deal with without glamorizing it or without seeming condescending towards it, but also, you know, giving the warts and all, you know, particularly we see in the Amy Adams character, you know, this representative of this particular culture of somebody who grew up with, you know, with a lot of advantages, you know, who's extremely smart, and when she's at her best, you know, she's very good with people. You know, she worked as a nurse and had a successful career for a long time, but her demons caught up with her, and so the movie touches on the opioid crisis, which is something that, again, I think we haven't heard nearly as much about as we should have. Even now, there have been a couple of documentaries about it, Netflix documentaries and other things that have talked about, you know, about the effect that this true pandemic of addiction has had, particularly on the white working class. It seems to have had the same effect on the white working class that crack in the 80s had on you know, blacks living in the inner city, and a lot of the same devastating results. And so I think you look at it that way, and, you know, you can kind of excuse some of the more sappy, sentimental kinds of stuff about it, and just see it as a positive portrayal of somebody growing up in this environment, and also we see him later on in his life. It skips around from his boyhood to when he's in college. You know, he's sort of the one who's made it out, but he's still struggling with his past. And you know, he's with the woman who's going to be his wife. And again, their names are all the same. So Usha, she's of Indian descent. She's another character in the movie, and yeah. So it's a watch. It's a movie I would recommend, with some reservations. But I think in particular, as a cultural artifact, and as this kind of anomaly, this anomalous phenomenon of a Hollywood movie showing a community in a positive light, even though without glossing over, you know, their the things that are unsavory about them. I think it stands out in that regard. You know, I would also have to say one last addendum, which is young JD is played by I don't know who the actor is, the young actor who plays him as a boy, but I found him very affecting, just because he's a little bit vulnerable. He's overweight. At one point, his mom calls him a fat ass or something, you know, when she's not at her best, which she is often not at her best. You know, he's self-conscious about his weight. You know, he's struggling. You know, there are bad influences. There are kids that he's hanging out with who might be leading him in the wrong direction. But like his mother, he's got all this potential. You know, he's got the same mind that his mother has. Even though his mother kind of ended up crashing and burning and succumbing to her demons. So there's lots of there are scenes where we see this kid, you know, this portly kid getting kind of knocked around a little. And he seems very real. He seems like not like a typical kid in a movie. He seems like a kid who maybe who you wouldn't be surprised to see in that environment. There's a real authenticity to him, and I don't know who he is, or I don't know if we'll ever see him again. Hopefully not. Hopefully, I say that because Hollywood young actors who go to Hollywood, it doesn't tend to go well for them. And so I kind of hope this was a one-off for him, and that he's, doing something else as a career. But anyway, that's my review, if you will, or those are my thoughts, my sort of impressionistic thoughts about the J.D. Vance autobiographical film, Hillbilly Elegy. So check it out.